Are we live? Ready to go? Okay. Good morning. During the declared emergency, Committee of Adjustment virtual public hearings are being conducted by electronic means through WebEx, an online digital platform, and streamed on the Toronto City Planning YouTube channel. These measures are necessary to comply with physical distancing requirements and in-person attendance limitations. This will be a virtual public hearing, and participants who have registered in advance will be able to make their presentations to the committee using WebEx, an online event that is being moderated by city staff. Anyone wishing to view the hearing may do so by watching on YouTube. Participants who have registered in advance will be connecting either by their computer, a phone or tablet app, or by telephone. All participants will automatically be muted on entry, and when your item is called, each participant will be unmuted by the moderator, one person at a time. Only the committee members will be participating by video. Panel members participating today are Don Taylor, Sophia Ruddick, Danny Bellissimo, and Stan Kumorik. Any registered participants will be participating by audio only, and we also ask that you mute your devices until you are called on to speak. Land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. In accordance with Sections 45 and 53 of the Planning Act 1990 as amended, this meeting of the Committee of Adjustment of the City of Toronto is called to order. The Committee of Adjustment considers applications for variances from the provisions of the zoning bylaw that apply to the property, permissions to extend or alter lawful non-conforming uses, and consents to sever properties to create new lots. Anyone in attendance today who wants to receive a copy of the decision of a committee on an application must submit a written request for a decision by email. Please ensure that you include your name, address, and email address, because Committee of Adjustment and the TLAB will be sending notifications and appeal updates by email. If you do not agree with the decision of the committee rendered here today, decisions may be appealed to the Toronto Local Appeal Body, or in some limited circumstances to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal. Appeal instructions are set out at the bottom of the decision of the committee. The hearing procedure will be as follows. I will call each item in the order listed in the agenda. We'll perhaps deal with some deferrals to clear them from the agenda at the outset. And when the application is uncontested, the agent or applicant may proceed with the presentation if desired. When the committee does not require a presentation, applicants are to advise the chair should they wish to speak to the committee. The committee may ask questions and or take the matter into the committee for a decision. Each speaker, including the applicant or agent, is given a maximum of 5 minutes to address the committee, and I will comment when you're reaching the 5-minute mark. When addressing the committee, please start off by clearly stating your name and address for the record, and please remember to confine your remarks to the matters outlined in the application. The applicant or agent goes first and makes their presentation to the committee. Please note the committee may not entertain revisions to proposals at the hearing today. The committee may decide to defer the matter if being substantially revised in order to ensure that the revised application is accurate and that all those entitled to notice of the application are informed of the changes. Then individuals either in support or opposed to the application will be invited to speak. Committee members may ask questions of each speaker at the end of their submissions. And when all speakers are finished, the applicant or agent is given an opportunity to rebut only those issues and answer those questions that have been raised by the speakers. That will then mark the end of the discussion on the matter, and the matter is then taken into committee for a decision. Confirmation of minutes of the last meeting. Paul, is there?
The minutes aren't ready yet, so they'll have to be done at the next hearing.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bartosik. Okay, are there any declarations of interest of panel or staff to declare on the matters on the morning agenda? Okay, none to declare. In that case, Madam Secretary, are there any files to be closed?
None today.
Okay, and perhaps I see that on the morning agenda there are a couple of deferrals on the planning memo. Sorry, did you say something?
And there's one from the agent, item 18. Maybe we
Yes.
can clear that one and get the
Right, okay,
speakers.
yep. Okay, so let's deal with those. So the first item on the deferral list is item number 7, 1745 Albion Road. Apparently this was an unclear waiver, and the speaker on this application is Michael Flynn, the agent. No other speakers registered in this application. Mr. Flynn, good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Mr. Chairman?
I'm well. Mr.
Good.
Flynn, so are you, I see staff is looking for a deferral. Are you in agreement?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Staff seems to have a problem understanding the bylaw. That's where the confusion comes from. The bylaw basically says that there may not be more than 500 square meters of food use.
Okay, let's not get
On
into
the
these. So you're opposed to the deferral request. You would like to proceed.
That's correct.
Okay, so we will proceed. You have the right to proceed on that matter. They were looking for, they said, the unclear waiver applicant to submit application for zoning review. So you can deal with that at the outset of your presentation when we get to your item. Okay. Is that acceptable, Mr. Flynn?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so the next one is item number 10, 14 VANSCO Road. The item on that application is TJ Secura. And this is to provide staff adequate time to review the application and perhaps have the applicant make some changes. Are you in favor of the deferral?
No, sir, we would like to proceed today, and I am more than happy to address the staff comments in my presentation to the committee.
Okay. Okay, so no one wants to defer today, so okay, we'll proceed with that one as well. And then number 18, that's a request by the agent in order to work with the planning department to revise the project. So that's item 39, Ringley Avenue.
Sorry, Chair, through you, the agent is actually not here today. I don't have him on my list.
Okay, so perhaps he thinks when he asked for that, he didn't have to appear. But I see there are two other speakers present on Aldgate Avenue registered to speak. So perhaps we just need to weigh in and let them know that this matter is being deferred at the request of the agent, and it's in order to work with planning, so it's probably a good thing in order to revise the project. And planning had recommended refusal, and transportation been requesting a revision. So is Eva Malinowska on the line?
Sorry, Chair, Eva is also not here, but Paul we do have.
Okay, so we'll just weigh in for formality and just let Paul know that he doesn't have to stay on the line because this matter will be coming back. Is Paul Eshley there, please?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good morning, sir. So this matter is being deferred at the agent's request. He's actually not even on the line. And the good news is whatever your concerns are, some of them may be alleviated once they make, it sounds like they're looking to make changes, especially in light of the planning department negative report.
Okay. So can I voice any of my concerns now?
No, they're not. That's not necessary. But the matter is being deferred. You will be re-notified when this matter is brought back on a further agenda, as well as with a copy of that application as revised, hopefully at that time. And then if you still have concerns, there will be another hearing.
That's great.
Okay. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too.
Okay, so we can start back at the top of the agenda and.
Sorry, we just need a motion for that deferral for item 18.
Oh, right. Okay.
Any Bellissimo moves for deferral?
Thank you, Mr. Bellissimo. Seconder for that. Ms. Reddick, thank you. All in favor? Matter is deferred. Okay. Okay, the first application is 170 ROYALAVON Crescent. It's an application to construct a new detached dwelling in the rear yard. There are 7 variances. We have an arbist report. Transportation has a condition of approval. And that is all we have. The speaker on this application, we only have one. There's the agent, David Igelman.
Good morning, Sir Chair.
Good morning. Okay, so I just introduced your application here. There doesn't seem to be any, there is urban forestry conditions 1 and 2. And you're aware of the transportation condition of approval?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I am aware, and these conditions are acceptable.
Okay, so I don't think we need a presentation from you. Would you like to advise the committee of anything before I see if anyone has any questions for you?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would just like to note that 5 of the 7 variances being requested are either an existing condition on the subject property today or are due to the proposed detached garage being maintaining the existing 1.6 meter setback to the existing detached dwelling. That's also an existing condition with the existing detached garage on the subject property today.
Thank you. Panel members, anyone have any questions for Mr. Igelman?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr.
I'm not sure if it's a question for the applicant or a question for staff, but transportation is requesting a condition. If that condition is imposed, then that'll be a conflict with one of the variances because in order to fulfill that condition, the garage will need to be made larger, and therefore the requested variance will be insufficient. So I'm not sure how we deal with that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may address that.
Go ahead.
I would just like to note that should the application be approved today by the committee, the proposal would have to be compliant with variance number 3. And with that being said, the proposed garage could not be extended larger, and the redesign would have to result in a garage that is less wide than what is currently shown on the proposal in order to be compliant with the floor area variance that we are requesting.
Okay, so you're of the opinion that you can have these conditions imposed, satisfy transportation, and not trigger any new or larger variances? Because Mr. Kamarick has
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Okay. Good thing that's been
So are
brought
you
to your
withdrawing
attention.
that variance?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we would not. We are okay with removing the variance number 2. We are okay with eliminating it. However, we are just seeking it out of an abundance of caution.
It's just the committee can't make a decision on a variance and then put in a condition that contradicts the variance. So if you're okay with that condition, it makes sense to then withdraw it. Is that what you're doing, withdrawing variance number 2 for the length of the garage, length of the parking space?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I am okay with eliminating variance number 2. The proposed length of 5.2 will be revised to 5.6.
Okay. So you don't need that variance because otherwise if it didn't comply, then, or it was different than a 5.2 and was smaller than 5.2, then you'd have to come back. Okay, so if you feel you can manage it, for some reason you can't, you would then have to, I guess, come back with a fresh application. So at least you've been advised of that. Any further questions for Mr. Igelman? Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, just so I understand, if variance 2 is being eliminated, I'm presuming that in order to keep variance 3 as is, the garage is going to have to be narrower. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct, Mr. Taylor.
Okay, thank you. So, sorry, Mr. Chair, if I may, by making the garage narrower, are you going to then get into a situation where the parking spot will be too narrow, or are you going to be able to meet the minimum requirement?
through you, Mr. Chair, the proposed parking space will be wide enough.
Okay.
With the redesign.
Okay, any other questions, or is someone ready to weigh in with a motion? Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I find the now 6 variances requested meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act. So I move approval of variances 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, subject to urban forestry conditions 1 and 2.
And the transportation conditions?
Well, the transportation concern, as I read it, was just the length of the garage. So I believe we were eliminating their sole concern by eliminating variance 2.
Correct.
But they were still looking that the proposed garage be redesigned to accommodate a legal on-site parking space. The garage must be redesigned, provide a minimum internal length of 5.6. Okay, so you're saying if they take that that variance out, we don't need that condition?
Correct.
Okay.
That would be my interpretation. Now, and I don't know the extent to which, if any, we have to make sure the extended garage does not encroach toward Goswell Avenue, which is already only set back 1 meter. Do we need, I mean, in my mind, it's obviously going to be extended on the rear wall of the garage.
Okay, so Ms. Bertosic, do you agree that we don't need this condition?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor, seconder for that motion.
Okay.
Mr.
Danny Bellissimo
Komarek.
seconds the motion.
Mr. Komarek beat you to it, so all in favor? Unanimous approval. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Igelman. We'll see you here
Thank
again.
you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Take care.
Okay, item number 2 is 232 Sheldon Avenue. It's an application to construct a new detached dwelling with an attached garage. There were 7 variances. There are now 2. We have a yellow revised notice sheet together with a revised zoning waiver and revised plans, and as shown on the revised yellow notice sheet highlighted. There's 21 letters of support. There's a cover letter. Now we just have variances for FSI and height, and both of which have been reduced. And we also have urban forestry conditions 2 and 3. The agent is Jagdeep Barmi, and we have the neighbor from 71 Lunes registered to speak as well in this application. Mr. Barmi.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair.
Okay, good morning. We have someone here with concerns or in opposition. We don't know. Maybe they're in support. So perhaps you'd like to make a brief presentation. I guess you've eliminated, most of the variances. You now have 2 variances left.
That's correct, sir. So we're proposing.
I see that we don't have any comments from staff other than urban forestry. So I don't know if you'd like to walk us through the application, or perhaps we should hear from the neighbor first, and you can just address their concerns. Does anyone, would you like Mr. Mr. Barmi to make a presentation, panel members, on this application? Not necessary, okay. So would you like to just advise the committee of anything before we hear from the neighbor? Mr. Barmi?
Yes, sir.
Would you like to let the committee members know anything?
I can make a brief. I can make just a brief presentation.
Okay, go ahead. Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So we're proposing a 2-story house of approximately 3,500 square feet with an integral garage. The existing house will be demolished. My client's been living at this house for the last 12 years and is looking forward to the rebuild. We're seeking 2 variances, which are minor in nature. Our zoning review identified 7 variances, but working with the city staff, we've eliminated 5 of them. There are no new comparable homes in the immediate context. Therefore, the city staff was reluctant to support it initially, but after our revision, it's been okay. We revised the plans and worked with the staff to bring the variances down to two. One is for the increased FSI from 0.45 to 0.606. And the second variance is it's an increase in maximum height from 7.5 to 8.25. A new trend in the neighborhood is severance of a 50-foot wide lot into two undersized lots, but my clients decided to retain the existing to fulfill his family's needs. Not in the immediate context, but there have been approvals in the past for similar FSI and similar heights. And there's also schedule applications coming up with higher FSI and higher height. So we understand that this is one of the first houses in the neighborhood to be seeking approval from the committee, but the neighbors realize the importance of such development and its impact on adjacent properties. Therefore, all neighbors were excited, and we've received 21 letters of support. In my opinion, both the variances are minor in nature and consistent with the criteria laid out in the official plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barmy. Any questions for Mr. Barmy before we go on to the hear from the neighbor? And the neighbor is directly behind the property.
Danny Bellissimo has a technical question.
Yes.
Referring to your elevation 2.0, and what I see is a center door, and to the left is a garage. Is that correct?
Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, your elevation, front elevation 2.0.
Yes.
To the left of the entry, is that a garage door there?
Yes, sir.
I want to see part of it. Is there a sloped driveway down into it then? Because
no, it's a positive slope. The city does not support negative slopes driveways since 2012.
So that garage door, it looks like only about 7 feet high. Is that correct? It's like
that's correct.
It's about the garage. Yes. Okay, so the grade doesn't change. Fine.
No.
There's no cross section, so I have a hard time understanding that drawing. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, if none, let's hear from the neighbor, Joseph Grande.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. Do I need to be on camera here?
Yes, sir. Can you please talk a little bit louder and just start off by stating your name and address?
Yeah, it's Joseph Grande. I'm at 71 Lunas Road, which is the property right behind the one on Sheldon. So can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you. I have no, Mr. Patel and his family have been neighbors with us for at least 10 years. I've been living in the property for 22 years, and he recently supported me in terms of my renovations that I'm doing on my house. However, we've kept it as a bungalow just to keep in conformity of the residents or the street. That being said, or the area. That being said, I'm not opposed to Mr. Patel and his family building a new home. Unfortunately, I don't think all the neighbors are aware, even though they have signed, petitions or anything like that, and they had an opportunity to go online. I don't think anybody actually did go online to actually see the size of this home. It is quite a big home, which I'm not opposed to. What I'm opposed to is, his house was a bungalow at first, and mine is a bungalow also. In terms of privacy, there wasn't much issue with regards to privacy. However, this very big home is now full of windows in the back, and I'm concerned more of the privacy that towards our house, and even privacy towards them. Like, I'm sure they want their privacy whenever they're having dinner out on patios and all that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to ask the committee if there is any consideration with regards to further privacy or privacy screening or anything like that, that we can come up to some kind of an agreement on, or anything like that. I know when facing Mr. Patel's house, on the right-hand side, that neighbor had put up an extra 2 feet of lattice for some more privacy. You know, I did speak to Mr. Patel about this, and a few weeks ago, and he said, you know, you're more than welcome to do that if you want. It's more of an eyesore than anything else, and all we're doing is adding an extra 2 feet of lattice onto it. It's just doesn't look good. And I was just wondering whether the committee has dealt with certain situations like this before and would consider some additional privacy screening or something like that, because the size of the house is all windows right to the top floor, and I got a pool, all that kind of stuff. So I'm not opposed to them building a house and a family house, and they want to be in the area, which is great. It's just for the privacy screening, or see if there was anything that we can maybe discuss to have that as an option.
Okay, are you proposing like a higher rear fence? Like, I don't know, rear fence is typically whatever the height is. I don't know if there's any limitation that can't be made, not allowed to have a 10-foot wall. I don't know, staff, is there any restriction on that? It's, I don't know if that's going to help. But again, we're only dealing with the 2 variances, not with the right to build a house. There is a slight height variance of about 3/4 of a meter. And then there's just the extra gross floor area. There's nothing else here. But is there any restriction on the fence if the neighbors do it and sort of no one complains? I don't know how, but is that something that the committee can impose as a condition, or even if it's appropriate or not? So those are my comments. Staff, Ms. Bartosik, do you know if there's any restriction on the height of a fence on the property? We're not talking about a privacy screen on let's say a rear deck or anything like that, a rear second floor balcony. We're actually talking about the main separating fence between the 2 properties at the rear of both.
Yes, there is a maximum height limit, and it's not a zoning provision. It's in the municipal code. So it's not something that the applicant can exceed. I believe it's roughly 1.8 meters, but they would have to confirm that with
Okay, so the committee certainly couldn't impose a height as a condition higher than the municipal code permits. So thank you.
No, because then he would
Thank you
never
for that
get a
answer.
permit.
Okay, so Mr. Grande, anyone have any questions for Mr. Grande? And if not, let's have a response from Mr. Barmy.
We used to have initially our main floor, the deck was attached to the main floor with a large landing. We actually eliminated that, and now we just have a smaller landing coming down with the steps, and the deck is down from 2.5 meters to 1.0 meters. So I don't think it'll be a privacy concern when Mr. Patel is having a party or having some guests over.
Okay, thank you. Anyone, panel members, any follow-up or final questions for either the applicant or the neighbor, or is someone ready to weigh in with a motion?
Danny Bedismo is ready to make a motion if there are no further questions.
Go ahead, sir.
I find that the variances are minor in nature, and I'd like to move approval for the variances on the conditions set out by forestry.
Okay, thank you. Seconder for Mr. Bellissimo's motion. Mr. Taylor, thank you. All in favor? Okay, unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Barmy, and thank you, Mr. Grande.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee members.
Okay, the next application is item number 3, 1067 Kipling Avenue. It's an application to construct a 2-story rear addition and a deck in the rear yard. There are 5 variances. We have an arborist report. We have supplementary material. Planning is asking for a condition of approval, actually to refuse the building length. And transportation has no objection. And my question is, if you refuse the building length, this is a question for the applicant, Mr. Dome, whether you can if that, could your application still work, or more or less is that sort of negating the entire application if you don't get the length? So that's one thing I would like to hear from the agent. Welcome, Mr. Dome.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're the only speaker. You're aware of the negative or the staff condition. They don't want you to have the building length. You've seen that report?
Yes, that's right.
So if would that condition or that elimination of that variance, would that, the variance number 2, would that basically, would you still be able to proceed with this project? If committee agrees?
No, because so basically it's for a 4th bedroom really, for an addition, and I would like to explain in the presentation. I can offer some more.
Okay,
context.
so yeah, go ahead. So I just wanted to know the impact, for you to state the impact of that, because sometimes they say eliminate one variance when, if that's such a crucial one, such as length or FSI or GFA, then the whole application wouldn't work. Then there's no point giving you know 4 other variances. Okay, so why don't you proceed with the presentation?
Okay. Hi, my name is Joe Dome, 1101 Steeles Avenue West, agent for the owner. I'd like to begin by stating that variances number 1 and 5 are existing conditions regarding the side yard setback and the front yard parking pad. Transportation is okay with the parking variance, which is only due to the existing non-conforming parking area in the garage. Regarding the variance number 3 for length, planning staff, as you mentioned, is objecting to that, only to that variance. But I would like to add some explanations here why respectfully we think it's not reflective of the actual context. The owner requires a 4th bedroom for their growing family needs, and they would really like to preserve the existing backyard patio, which they love and use frequently. The existing placement of the pool and patio in relation to the house and the existing bedrooms necessitates the current design. And I would like to point out to the supporting materials doc as well, if you could bring that up. Yes, okay. So basically this illustrates how the length variance is mainly due to that existing 1-story attached garage on the north side. And on the south side of the house, including the proposed rear addition, it only extends to 17.42 meters, and that would actually be including the existing fireplace bump out at the front. So there would be essentially no area of the house extending to a length of 20.78 meters. And the remainder of the house actually measures significantly under the bylaw for length. The next image, if you can go one page down. So that's to the north at 1087 Kipling. As you can see, the south full 2-story portion of the house extends farther past their neighbors. In fact, the length is slightly greater at 17.68 meters than the 17.42 proposed on the south portion of this application. And you can also see how it's lined up in relation to 1067 and the length of the proposed addition. The last image is from 1027 Kipling. So that's one page down. Just to the south, and you can see another full 2-story addition that extends significantly past its neighbors. And furthermore, there are a number of previous decisions in the area approving lengths over 20 meters. That's including 17 Burnhamthorpe Park Boulevard and 81 Mattis Avenue, along with 40 Mattis Road and 54 Renown Road as well. The owner has had conversations with both direct neighbors and they had no objections. And given the context of the existing site and proposal, along with the examples both on the streets and the surrounding streets for comparable lengths, we do feel that the proposal is reasonable and minor in nature. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dome. So in giving your explanation and the concern of staff, would an appropriate condition of approval, if members felt it was supportable, would be to have it built, constructed as illustrated on the site plan as it relates to the length? Would that be appropriate? Because then you couldn't then go ahead and build more than that beyond the length limitation, except as shown on the site plan. So that it would alleviate that. I see, note you don't have a GFA or FSI variance, that you could maybe have some room and do more than that. So that perhaps would keep, sort of keep you honest on that. Would that be appropriate?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Okay, committee members, and I like I said, I take it we don't have either of the neighbors, any neighbors in opposition. And you did say you discussed it, your client has discussed it with his immediate neighbors. Any questions for Mr. Dome? And if no questions, is someone ready to weigh in with a motion?
Danny Bellissimo, I'd like to make a motion. I find that this proposal was very creative in nature, and I accept the discussions made by the applicant in terms of the length that only affects part of the building because the garage is what's causing the issue in length. So I would like to move for approval, and I think your suggestion for as chair to tie it to the site plan is a good suggestion. So I would move that it be conditional on the layout and site plan drawing A100.
Okay, thank you. Construct as illustrated with respect to the length issue. Seconder for that motion? Mr. Komorik, thank you. All in favor? You have unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Dome.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And it looks like you're the agent on the next application as well. Item number 462 Belvedere Boulevard. This is for various additions, two-story rear addition, two-story east side addition, which will include an attached garage. And there are 5 variances. We have 1 letter of opposition with some concerns from the neighbor next door at 64. They have 4 concerns as set out in their letter. Otherwise, we have nothing whatsoever other than urban forestry requesting condition number 2. No comments from transportation or planning or any other neighbors. So we do have...
Oh, actually, excuse me. You do actually have another neighbor from 63 Belvedere. I didn't do a submission, but I would like the
Oh,
opportunity.
yes, okay, so I was just going to get to
thank you.
that. I guess we don't
Okay,
have everyone
sorry,
on
thank you.
mute. We do have, so actually the neighbor that wrote in, I don't believe is with us. Oh, yes, it is. 64 Belvedere and 63 Belvedere, Jennifer Hines and Jackie Conant. So let's hear from Mr. Dome, and then we'll hear from the 2 neighbors.
Yes. Okay. I would like to make a presentation.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Joe Dome, 1101 Steeles Avenue West, agent for the owner. I'd like to begin by pointing out that we have had discussions with planning and have made revisions according to their recommendations. And as a result, they now have no objections with the application. This revision pertained to staggering the second floor over the garage on the east side to meet the bylaw for side yard setback. They had no issues with the side yard setback on the west side, which is a continuation of the existing setback, nor for the garage itself on the east side. The height variance number 5 is an existing condition that mainly pertains to a smaller portion of the roof. And from the street, the dwelling has a sloped roof profile. From the peak of the roof, it slopes to the rear in an identical style to the direct neighbor at number 60. The height is reduced going back to the rear wall, which is at a height of 6.49 meters. So most of the rear addition is in fact below the 7.2 meter bylaw. Regarding the proposed floor space index of 0.67, which is variance number 2, and the lot coverage of 34.61%, which is variance number 1, there are examples on the street, such as number 49 Belvedere, which was approved for an FSI of 0.68 and a lot coverage of 37%, and 52 Belvedere, which was approved for a 0.79 FSI and a 51% lot coverage. We do feel that the proposed dwelling is reasonable and minor in nature and does fit within the existing physical character of the street. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Panel members, any questions for Mr. Dome before we go hear from the neighbors? Okay, so the first neighbor listed is Jennifer Hines of 63 Belvedere, I guess across the street. And then we'll hear from the next door neighbor, who has also given a letter. Welcome, Ms. Hines.
Appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation. Many of the homes in our area, west of Royal York and I guess east of Montgomery, have been renovated, including mine over the years. I've been here for close to 30 years, and kept to the style, size, and manner that fit into the area. I certainly welcome the update to 62 Belvedere because essentially it was an original owned home, somewhat tired, and I would welcome new neighbors. I unfortunately have not had the opportunity to speak to either the new neighbors or the agent about what this is about, so I'm going strictly from paper. I do have a number of questions and concerns, and some of them may have been addressed, but I found that, initially, even just looking at the plan that is shown, the, large amount of addition that has been added to this relative to the existing dwelling and even relative to some of the other. So in particular, there seems to be an increase in size and coverage. And my concern is that it fit into the neighborhood. One is the gross floor area being 39%. It's quite significant higher than the allowable 25%. The setback, as was mentioned, particularly on the east side, I hadn't seen the difference in terms of the setback. The top, I think it looks like the second floor has been pushed back. I'm not entirely certain what that implications are. And also the other one is the flat roof as over a meter higher than what is permitted. And I guess this increased height, the combined flat roof and the 4 large gables creates a fairly imposing structure and raises a couple of issues. I'm not sure what's contributing to the height. Is it a higher basement, taller floors or whichever? And it also raises a concern about potential for future 3rd-story addition. And then finally, just as more an assurance, is that there is a very large mature catalpa tree, really concerned about the health and existence. It's somewhat of a landmark tree, and want to make sure that it is, very close inspection occurs throughout the construction to ensure that its health and existence continues to be. So to summarize, really, I think it's, very much welcome a new home to the area, because I think it'll certainly add. But in looking at it from the pictures and having not had a chance to either meet or speak to the neighbor or the agent, it just seems somewhat overwhelming relative to the homes that are west of Royal York. So that's really where I come from at this point.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hines. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Hines before we move on to the next speaker? Okay, so the next speaker is Jackie Conant at 64 Belvedere Boulevard, and we have her letter.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before the committee. And I share many of the same concerns that have been expressed by my neighbor. My first concern was with respect to variance number 5 over the height of the building. Certainly that 1 meter higher than the permitted elevation was a concern for me. I guess in addition is the overall design with respect to the 4 large gable windows, I think does express a considerably larger building than anything that is seen in our neighborhood currently. And my fear is that, as we have seen in other neighboring streets, that with the addition of the 4 gables, a 3rd floor will eventually be built in the home, and that would be a concern as well. So again, from the aesthetics of the property, I think the 4 gable is a little imposing, and would wonder as to the necessity for the extended height. I also share a concern about the health of the large catalpa tree in the front yard. And as we share a number of cedars along the rear edge of the property that will likely have to be trimmed back. I think one of the cedars on 62 Belvedere will come down, but there is an existing wall of cedars that I have a concern about when they are, in fact, when they will be trimmed back. So they're really my concerns. I know Mr. Doe mentioned about the extended height, but I'm still not convinced that there is a need for that extended height elevation.
Okay,
And I
thank you.
did submit this in writing.
Anything you'd like to add to that, or your those are the
No,
extent
that's
of your
fine. Thank
submissions?
you.
Okay, so yeah, we have this variance for the flat roof height meter over. So that seems to be raised by concern by both neighbors. In terms of the gable or the look, we're not the design police, so we look at the variances if it affects the floor space index, but the fact that we're not the design police here. Perhaps the question that's come up, and we can ask Mr. Dome to answer, is what are the internal ceiling heights of the basement, main floor, and second floor, in terms of looking, because I think the neighbors are mentioning why the necessity for the height. And other than that, I'll turn it back to Mr. Dome to respond to the concerns of the neighbors, unless does someone have any questions. So at this time for Ms. Conant, the author of the letter and the last speaker. No? Okay, so we'll let Mr. Dome answer.
Yes, and I'd like to point out, we appreciate the neighbors' comments. I would like to point out that the height variance is an existing condition, and in fact, as I mentioned before, much of the sloped roof is under the bylaw, and it actually matches the design of the neighbor next door at number 60. And as far as the trees, every effort will be made to help come to an agreement with the neighbors' concerns regarding trimming, and urban forestry does not have any concerns with the application. And the gables are mainly cosmetic and don't contribute to a third story. And as far as FSI goes, as I mentioned before, there are examples on the street. So that would be 49 Belvedere, FSI of 0.68, and a lot coverage of 37%. And number 52 Belvedere, 0.79 FSI with a 51% lot coverage.
Okay. Panel members, any questions for Mr. Dome, or is someone ready for a motion?
Just one question. I heard reference to the height of 64, the neighbor. So can the applicant, does it have the numbers in terms of what the height is of number 64 versus what is being proposed at number 62?
Unfortunately, I don't have the actual number of the height, the difference, but the height variance is an existing condition, so the peak of the roof is not changing.
Okay, any other questions, or is someone ready to make a motion? Mr. Taylor.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm prepared to make a motion here. Just sort of a comment for the two folks that called in opposition. The essence of their concerns is the overwhelming nature of this building compared to neighboring homes and its height. I'd just like to say that one of the considerations that are critical for us as a committee to consider in reviewing applications is the official plan for the City of Toronto, and specifically section 4.1.8, which basically says that the compliance of any proposed structure in a neighborhood is guided by the zoning standards in place. So we really have to look at not so much as the comparison of this house to what's on the street, but the comparison of what's proposed to the zoning standards. So when we do that, I'm satisfied that the variances meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I'm prepared to move approval subject to urban forestry condition 2.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Do we have a seconder for that motion?
Danny Bellissimo seconds the motion.
Thank you, Danny. All in favor Okay, the application is unanimously approved. Thank you, Mr. Dome, and thank you to the neighbors for weighing in as well. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so our next application is item number 5, 3 Boyd Avenue. It's to construct a new detached dwelling with an attached garage, and there are 3 variances. And all we have on this application is a covering letter from the agent, and a transportation has advised that there's no objection. There is urban forestry condition number 1. That's all we have. And there is only one speaker, the agent, Amritpal Bansal.
Good morning, committee chair member.
Good
Well,
morning.
do we need a presentation for this this file?
No, I don't think, unless you, is there anything you'd like to advise the committee of, though? I don't think we need a fulsome presentation.
No, I'd just like to note that a few of the variances we did have higher requests at the beginning, but have worked with planning staff to reduce them to in order to get support.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Bansal, or is someone ready for a motion?
Any listeners ready for a motion?
Yes, sir.
I find that the variances are minor in nature and move for approval of the variances subject to forestry condition.
Thank you. Seconder for that? Mr. Komarek?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor? And another unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Bansal. You have your approval.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay. Next application is item number 6, 34 WESTGLEN Crescent. An application to construct a new detached dwelling with an attached garage. We have a cover letter, supporting material, an arborist report. We do have, revised drawings here.
Sorry, Chair, through you, the agent actually isn't here and hasn't registered, so there is actually no one to speak on this application.
Marin Zabzuni is not here.
No, he's not.
Okay, so perhaps let's stand it down. I don't know if he's going to make an appearance. He is the only speaker, and there is nothing on file other than urban forestry requesting conditions 1 and 2. Yeah, we have, I think this one we have revised drawings and a zoning waiver, and he made changes after speaking with planning. The question is, are the variances based on the new drawings? That was a question I had for him. And he provides, supporting material statistics. There are 8 letters of support and an arborist report. And planning is looking for
So, Mr. Chair, we can hold this one.
Okay,
and
so
then
maybe he'll
Adam can call him.
okay, so perhaps you can try to contact him. He's a regular agent, so perhaps we have some contact information and see why he is not with us. Okay, so the next one is item number 7, 1745 Albion Road. This was the application, Mr. Flynn's application, that planning was requesting a deferral, and he is advised he would like to proceed. So let me just introduce this. Okay, it's an application to increase the interior floor space of the existing eating establishment. We have a previous decision from April 2015 to operate a banquet hall in Building A. I don't know if this is also in Building A. We'll hear from Mr. Flynn. Transportation has no objection. We have opposition from a planner. We have a letter on behalf of 1780 pointing out that there's no parking justification study has been submitted, and I guess the only variance is that eating established in the E zone is limited to 500 square meters, and we had the planning comment that they were unclear as to about the waiver. So, Mr. Flynn, welcome.
Good day, sir. How are you?
As good as it was a few minutes ago. So I think we need a presentation on this in light of the the position from planning. So if you can advise why that shouldn't be necessary.
Yes, sir. First of all, this is a large property containing 2,500 square meters of buildings. Many are food, and the bylaw restricts the amount of food use on the property to 500 square meters. Well, currently, there is 3,300 square meters on the property, GFA, of which 2,500 are approved for food, including the banquet hall, which is 1,500 square meters all by itself. So what's happening on this is that planning, or the planning gentleman, Daniel, didn't understand the bylaw and didn't think we even needed a variance until I explained it to him, which then caused him more than enough chagrin to keep us busy for a while. You may also know that there is an approval through committee for a hotel above the banquet hall, which would make use of the banquet hall as part of its facility, which is still tied up in T-Lab, and the decision has been pending for 6 months. So we don't know what's going on with that. But I don't think it's relevant particularly. But what we're asking for is to reallocate space in the amount of 74 square meters to expand this restaurant called Caribbean Line. The area that we're talking about was originally a food area, was part of a restaurant, and then they left, and the landlord leased it to a barber shop, which left shortly thereafter, and then he put in Caribbean Lime, including this space in question, at which point building department came along and said, well, no, you can't use that for restaurant because it wasn't a continuous legal non-conforming use. So you'll have to go to committee to get that area approved. So planning then just said, well, you might be generating a parking variance. And the interesting thing about that is that because of this T-Lab appeal that's still underway, or through all of this, the OMB eliminated the former parking ratios under the old bylaws. So the T-Lab decided that no parking variances were required, that we had more than sufficient parking, and therefore it's not an issue. So what we end up with is only this approval to allow this space to be converted back to restaurant, totaling 74 square meters, which isn't a very large variance given the size of the building. So I would suggest to you that it meets the 4 tests and that it should be approvable.
Thank you,
That's it
Mr.
for
Flynn.
that. You're welcome.
Okay. Question for staff. Just looking the way the variance is written, it says the maximum permitted interior floor area of all eating establishments may not exceed 500 square meters. First of all, it says all eating establishments, so we're way, 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 way over. And then it just says the variance is the proposed eating establishment will exceed the total interior floor area. Mr. Flynn has told it that's 74 square meters, but that's not the way it's written. So the question is, once we're over, if he gets this granted, could he, instead of 74 square meters, could he perhaps increase it to 75 or 150 square meters? Or would there be some limitation based on what's approved implicit, that it's what he applied for, and if he wanted more, they'd have to come back again? So that's just a question for staff.
The way it's worded, it wouldn't limit the size that he's increased. But if he's told us what that amount is, the committee could add that as a condition for this particular restaurant.
Correct.
I believe the zoning review wasn't specific enough because maybe they didn't have the information on any other eating establishments, but you can tie this one to a specific size.
Right, because it says the variance is for all eating establishments. We've already heard from Mr. Flynn that the banquet hall alone is 1,500 square meters. So Okay, so that's been clarified. Committee members, any questions for Mr. Flynn? Or if not, is someone ready to weigh in with a motion? Mr. Taylor?
Not prepared to make a motion at this point. I'd like a discussion with my colleagues. Yeah, I've got some lack of clarity issues with this. I don't know what existing establishment we're talking about. We've heard about this 1,500 square foot eating area, I guess, in the E zone that's already existing. I just don't know from what I'm looking at, which I'm being asked to decide on, is exactly what's proposed. I don't know the eating establishment. Am I alone in this, or?
I have the specific numbers if you'd like them.
I think we're more interested in some drawings to show what's existing and what's proposed.
Yeah, what's up with this?
I believe we have those on file.
Can you guide us through those then, please?
Certainly. There are two drive-through restaurants. One is a Tim Hortons, the other is a KFC. And then there is the banquet hall. There's Caribbean Lime, which existing is 194 square meters.
Yeah, but
And
where is that on the drawing? Where is that on the drawing, Mr. Flynn?
It is in block. Where is it? Okay, block D.
Yeah, that's.
You see that?
Yeah.
So the drawing I'm looking at right now says Caribbean Lime for a large portion of the area and then a barber shop for a small portion of the area. So that's Unit 2 and Unit 2A.
Unfortunately, your plans aren't labeled that way.
Is there any advantage to me emailing this to you right now?
No, so if
Wouldn't
you look
benefit?
at block D, which of these units is the existing restaurant? The TO restaurant?
Yes.
Okay, because you said existing is 194. This says it's 155.
It's 194.24. I have just had new site plans made up, so that's what I'm using.
But is that with the expansion?
No, the total area would be 268.54 with the expansion. You see where the shawarma takeout is? Does it show that?
Nope.
Okay.
There's a building C, then a hair salon, 155, mobile phone store, 72, hair salon, 72, which doesn't make sense because they're completely different sizes. TO restaurant, 155, and grocery store, 155.
And this says convenience, so that's the grocery store. All right.
Based on this plan, Where is the existing restaurant?
Beside the grocery store.
So the TO restaurant.
Correct.
And where is it expanding into?
On my plan, it says 2A, which is called the barber shop.
So the hair salon.
Right.
But that only is labeled as 72 square meters.
And it says 74.3. I have to tell you, I'm not very happy with this architect.
It still doesn't add up to 268.
So it's 72, but he's asked for 74, so we're 2 square meters off. So I guess Mr. Flynn, just in abundance of caution, would want the variance for the 74, subject to as shown on his plans.
Yes.
Being the barber
I did
shop.
apply these numbers to staff.
So we got to move on. We have to either make a decision or decide what we're doing on this, because we're only on application number 7 and we have a long day ahead of us. So if we're going in circles, we have to keep things back on track. So we now know where the expansion is. It's the hair salon / barbershop, 72 or 74 square meters, and the question is whether that is worthy of acceptance, or if, as Mr. Taylor still feels that there is some lack of clarity in this application.
So for the members, for clarity, should you want to add a condition, you could say that that the variance be for the expanded restaurant within building D, having a maximum floor area of 268.54 square meters. But you don't have the plans that match that. That's just based on the applicant's information today.
I'm prepared to make a motion if we're at that stage.
Go ahead, Ms. Reddick. Thank you.
Motion that we refuse this application, suggest that the applicant make an application for a zoning review as requested.
So you said not to defer, but to refuse?
I believe he was objecting to the deferral. So if he's objecting to deferral, then the motion's to have it refused, I believe. If he's now accepting a deferral, I'm fine to change my motion to a deferral with the recommendation that he apply to zoning for review as requested. But my understanding was he was not agreeing to the deferral.
Okay.
Okay, now I'll agree to a deferral.
I don't have a motion, and the member made a motion for refusal. So
we need to have a deal with that through to completion. So do we have a seconder for the refusal motion? Mr. Taylor?
I'll second that. Yes, I'll second that motion.
To refuse the application?
Yes, motion to refuse.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? So that carries 3-2. Mr. Comeric, you were opposed as well as me, right? I didn't see your hand.
Yeah, I was prepared to defer it, but that's
okay. So the motion carries 3-2. The application is refused. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. We'll see you back here. Did we find Mr. Zabzuni yet?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have.
Okay, so let's go back to item number 6. 34 WESTGLEN CRESENT, application for a new detached dwelling with an attached garage. There are, as I went through, I think I introduced it previously, we have revised drawings, zoning waiver, made changes after speaking with planning, and planning is looking for a condition of approval to be constructed as illustrated on the revised site plan in relation to the proposed south side yard setback. And we have urban forestry 1 and 2. Mr. Zabzuni.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Marin Zabzuni at 1140 the Queensway.
Okay. Would you like to advise the committee members of anything? I don't think we need a presentation on this. My question is the variances, they're now based on the revised drawings.
Correct.
We have an arborist report, 8 letters of support. Any questions for Mr. Zabzuni? Okay, if not, is someone ready to weigh in with a motion?
I'm ready for a motion. I find the application to be meeting the 4 tests and acceptable. However, I would like to, as revised, and I would like to make it subject to forestry conditions 1 and 2, and also tie to site plan of September 1st as to the proposed south yard setback.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Komarek. Seconder for that motion.
Andy Bellissimo seconds the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Bellissimo. All in favor? Unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Zabzuni.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 8 is 5 Humber Ridge Drive. It's an application to construct a 2nd story above the existing dwelling with a new front porch and a new covered rear deck. And there are 4 variances, and we have nothing whatsoever on this application. No comments from city staff or neighbors. Speaker is Craig Reitz. Good morning,
Yes,
sir.
good morning. Good morning. Yes, Craig Reitz at CR Design Studio. I'm agent for the owners. Thank you for your time this morning.
Okay, so we have 4 rather minor variances here, as shown in the notice, and we have no communication from anyone on this. So, committee members, any questions for Mr. Reitz, or is someone ready to weigh in with a motion? Unless, Mr. Reitz, if anything you'd like to advise committee members before they...
Yeah, we just like to actually, item number 4 related to building height and a height variance has been eliminated. We just haven't received a revised zoning notice, been waiting for some time on that. And it's actually the submitted drawings to the committee do reflect this change, so we're actually not requesting a height variance at this time.
Okay. You still need the soffit height though, right?
That's correct, yeah.
So the height was
And,
0.03 of a meter, so it was pretty small to start with.
1.5. Yeah, and actually the revision again, which is reflected, does reduce that variance to just from 6 inches to 4 inches. So it'll still be a variance. It's a slight change, very minor, of course.
Okay. Any questions, or is someone ready for a motion? Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I find the variances meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act. So I move approval of variances 1, 2, and 3 without conditions.
Thank you. Seconder for that.
Andy Bellissimo seconds the motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Reitz.
Thank you very much.
Okay, item number 9 is 15 Fiesta Lane. It's an application for we have a revised highlighted in yellow sheet with revisions, as well as revised plans and a waiver. And we have, there still are 6 variances, but 2 of them have been reduced. There are, TRCA has no objection. There are 2 letters of opposition from 6 Tanglewood and no address on the second one, so perhaps we can get some clarification. And in the additional materials, we have an applicant's presentation and 4 letters of support. And planning is requesting 3 modifications and 1 condition of approval. We'll hear from the agent on that as well, whether that's acceptable. And we have the speaker, the agent is Peter Giordano, as well as we have the neighbors from 4 and 6 Tanglewood Terrace registered to speak, and the neighbor at 9 Fiesta Lane. So, Mr. Giordano, welcome.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Okay, I think we should get a presentation here. Perhaps you can go through the, the revisions you made. I believe we have your supporting materials in the presentation. We can get that up on the screen as you make your presentation.
Yes, that's great. Could I ask the moderator to display slide number 3, please? Next one. Oh, sorry, well, just before this. Okay, yeah, right there. So the subject property is a corner lot with Fiesta Lane to the front, Tanglewood Terrace to the right or west, and South Humber Park to the rear or south. If you can skip to slide number 6, please. Okay, right there. The property is a topographically challenged siting in a natural grading hollow, with grade rising steeply to the left and to the rear. The topographic survey on the screen shows the immediate neighbor at number 11 has a finished floor over 6.5 meters higher than the existing home in this property. Slide number 8, we don't have to go there, but we can display that as we pass along. Displays images of this. Okay, it's on the screen right now. So you can see how the existing home to the right of us is substantially higher, and the property grade at the rear is also significantly higher. Slide number 7, please, the one just before this. So over 6 months of geological studies and intense discussions with TRCA exposed an extremely restrictive development zone. You can see from this image that the extent of the toe of slope coming down onto our property from adjacent properties, combined with a 6-meter offset from TRCA, leaves a small allowable area of development, which I've highlighted in blue. We were given permission by TRCA to retain the existing garage footprint on the far left of the property, as the right side of this garage wall, in fact, acts as a retaining wall. It retains about 1.5 meters of soil, and we don't want to change that to prevent from impacting trees that are currently on that left side of our property. The original design for this property was a 2-story home, but these TRCA imposed footprint restrictions required floor plan stacking, forcing a 3rd floor level to be added. We were careful to express this massing facing the street as a 2.5-story facade with dormers and dropped roof eaves. The soffit towards the back becomes higher, so we can have at least some better window exposure towards South Humber Park natural treescape. But we are also still well within our allowable floor space index of 0.45, and of course our coverage of 33 with this proposal. We worked diligently with the planning staff to reduce the impact of height, and with this zoning waiver, we lowered the height by about 4.5 feet. We submitted the waiver with the revised drawings. The revised drawings that are on file right now reflect the revisions that I'm speaking of right now. If you could go to slide 12, please. So this is the elevation, our revised elevation for our home. We found a strong neighborhood comparable. It's just around the corner at number 15 River Valley Crescent. It was approved recently with a height of 11.3 meters. We believe our design, and that's the photos you see above, we believe our design better suits the character of the neighborhood and has a more modest expression of massing with the 1.5-story design appearance compared to the full 3-story look recently approved. Our clients canvassed the neighbors, have 4 letters of support from many, and with many expressing verbal support and positive feedback. A telephone conversation with our neighbor number 11 to the left of us only a few days ago addressed his questions, and positive feedback was offered to us. We acknowledged 2 letters of opposition, but one does not have a name or address provided, so I'm a little unsure about how to even defend or discuss that letter. We asked Nicole to withdraw this letter, and she suggested she would reach out to them for additional information. As of yet, we're still not aware of who that letter came from. The letter in opposition on file expresses that there are no three-story buildings in this neighborhood. My slide number 5, if you could just, sorry, go back to 5, excuse me, shows a strong mix of many 2.5 and 3.5 story homes in this neighborhood. I've itemized and located all the different heights of the properties in the neighborhood. I also have photographs, evidence on the rest of my presentation that shows slides along the way that show photograph of the increased massing in the neighborhood. Slide number 13, please, at the very end.
And Mr. Giordano, if you can please wrap up also, because you're fine.
Yeah, I'm wrapping up right now. Yeah. So items number 2, 3, and 4 are all related to height. Items number 1 and 5 are a result of the need to retain the existing front wall of the house. In conclusion, we have support from TRCA, Ravine, planning staff. We believe the merits of our proposal pass the 4 tests of Section 45 of the Planning Act, and I can answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jordan. I just point out that in the planning report, so that the revisions that they're recommending have been made in terms of the 3 conditions or the modifications that that has already been modified, correct? And they're reflected in these plans?
That is correct.
Okay, and then you're no problem with the other...
Actually, to that effect...
Just hang on, Mr. Kamara, please.
Order.
So those 3 variances, you're okay with the other condition they recommend, the bird-friendly treatment?
That's fine.
Okay, and I just point out that they do make a mention that the steep grade change to the east and unique constraints of the natural feature result in a reduction to buildable area of the site, which in turn makes the site a good candidate for a house with a taller height and a smaller footprint. Mr. Kamarick, what were you weighing in with?
Sorry, I just, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to clarify what you were saying, because perhaps I'm not seeing this, but I believe with respect to variance 2, planning had asked for 9.41, and I don't see that on the revision.
That is in fact what the height of the building is at the soffit, 9.41. That's the height from average grade to the underside of the lowest soffit. The highest soffit.
So it's not in your package, members. It was missed, but the one that's shown on the screen right now does show that for variance number 2.
And our drawings do reflect that number as well.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify, because I see that now, but I could not see that on any of the material we have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kamarick. You're satisfied now, so let's move on then. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Giordano before we move on to hear from the neighbors? And perhaps we'll find out, we have the speaker who wrote the first letter, 6 Tanglewood, and I believe we have one of the 2 spouses going to be speaking, not both. Their names are down. Perhaps it's one of the other 2 speakers, and we'll find out if staff has determined or been able to figure out who wrote that letter. Nicole?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is actually Oliver from 4 Tanglewood Terrace.
Okay, so good segue. He's the next speaker. Oliver Chu of 4 Tanglewood. Oliver Chu? Okay, if we've lost him, why don't we hear then first from Jenny Choi or Robert Lamb at 6 Tanglewood, and we'll come back to Oliver after. And they wrote the first letter. So who's speaking, Jenny or Robert?
Hi, it's Robert Lamb. I'm the owner of 6 Tanglewood Terrace, and I would like to thank the committee and you, the chair. I've lived here for approximately 15 years. My concern is regarding the amended height of the home at 15 Fiesta. The original height was proposed at 12.74 meters, and this was amended to a height of 11.37 meters, but this is still 1.87 meters above code, which is 6 feet. And this is a 20% increase in excess of the code. I believe that this is not a minor variance, but a major variance. In my opinion, it is too tall and is it blocks visual access to the green space of many of the neighbors. It's also disproportionately tall in that it compromises the privacy of my home, which is across the street from Tanglewood Terrace. It allows a visual line of sight into my master bedroom because my home uses transom windows, which was a key design feature of several homes in the neighborhood. It was a Dan Dunlop design, and this compromises my privacy. I would also like to say that because this height, even though it's been amended, is still over 6 feet above code, which is a 20% increase above the code. And if this is allowed at 20% above code, it does set a precedence for the entire neighborhood. If possible, I did submit slides to Nicole. I'm not sure if it can be shown, or if I can share my screen. Am I able to share my screen?
Staff is shaking
No.
their head no.
Okay. That concludes my main comments. Thank you very much.
Okay, was there anything appended to your letter, Mr. Lamb? I see your letter here.
So I did attach
Yeah.
another diagram to Nicole.
Okay. And sir, you did see the
So,
staff
Melrose.
report. The staff report indicated that they felt that due to the unique constraints of this lot, of the natural features, resulting in a reduction of the buildable area, they feel it's a good candidate, I'm reading directly, makes the site a good candidate for a house with a taller height and smaller footprint. And so they've then, it's been modified downward.
So this is the height of the house. You can see in the background.
Okay.
The originally proposed height, which is the top of the pink area, is, in my opinion, too tall. And the amended height is the top of the.
No, it's not. That's 9.5 meters.
Oh, the building code is the top of the purple or the lilac diagram. So what I'm suggesting is that the building code be followed and not have it 20% above or 6 feet above what is required. This is a picture of my bedroom, and you can see the top of the roof. When this home, and you can see the pink area, that's what the house will look like. And it's a clear sight line through the transom windows, which was designed by the architect of several homes in our neighborhood. And that would allow a direct sight line into the bedroom.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anything you'd like to add, or those are your submissions? Any questions for Mr. Lamb before we move on to the next speaker? Okay. Next speaker is, I guess we'll go back to Oliver Chu back on the line. We get him.
Hello.
Mr.
Hi,
Chu?
Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your attention. Yeah, I filed a letter, and my mistakes, I didn't put my name in signature underneath the letter, but I did mention in bullet point 1A that I'm the new custom home owner at 4 Tanglewood. I did the submission about 2.5 years ago to COA, and my architect worked very hard to build a new home in the environment, trying to stay within the COA allowance of 9.5 meter height. We do custom truss, like in the roof, multiple angles, more expensive in order to stay within the height limit. And because of the community is so special, right? As you can tell, you walk in the Tanglewood and Fiesta Lane, it's all surrounded by forest and natural environment. And this is the whole community to enjoy. And I feel like the new proposed home at 15 Fiesco Lane, as illustrated by Rob's picture, and I also did a similar things at the end of the letter to illustrate how it's going to block everyone when they're driving into Tanglewood and looking into the ravine. Um, because the height is so high, almost all the trees will be blocked, and which means it turning into the value of the community and the environment will be less value, because when I bought the home, when I come in, we just like, oh, I'm in a paradise. Like this is like a lot of people coming to hiking and traveling through the hike, and 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 now we will be losing a significant view of these forest ravine. I understand they have a lot of restriction when they purchase the property, because I did a lot of effort to protect, to satisfy ravine, to replant 14 different new trees in my backyard. So we do all the efforts to compliance with the city allowance and make this environment beautiful. So I will also wish my neighbor could do the same. If you're saying, okay, I have to maintain these big size of house, then why can't you go deeper into your backyard? Because I see that you still have plenty of rooms to make the footprint bigger instead of going tall. I mentioned that I barely see three-story house in this community is because when I walk around, yeah, you use 15 River Valley as an example, but I don't know that exactly three-story, but that was ugly. That was gigantic when everybody walked by. And I don't want that to happening again in this community. Whatever you point out, the rest of the three-story or 2.5-story, they are underground garage. I don't think that's considered as a story, because the building, they are your neighbor of 11 Fiesta Lane, they are up in the cliff. Your picture showing is a little distorted because they are very, very high in the cliff. So you cannot compare all, because my neighbor is up in the hill, up in the cliff, and my building can go as tall as I want. So I think that's misleading to the COA. So what I'm saying is, we like to keep the community as a low rise building because we have enough land space. This is a beautiful ravine lot, and we don't need to be like regular downtown core like laneway house that you have to go tall in order to maintain your floor space. Like as you see in the picture, that's actually a 2-story, but they have an underground garage, right? So so I hope the city the city will consider that the request from the neighbors, because a lot of children playing in the open space on the street, and we want to keep this as beautiful as it is, rather than we losing sight to all the forests and trees. Um, and if they can consider, they could. I mean, if they're applying for committee of adjustment to increasing the height, why they cannot apply for committee of adjustment to going deep? Because the lot is still big enough, even take away the TLCA reserved area.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any
Thank you for
questions for
listening.
Mr. Chu before we go on to the last speaker, the neighbor next door? Oh, sorry, at 9 Fiesta Lane. Okay, so let's hear from Howard Lee at 9 Fiesta Lane.
Hello, and thank you for hearing me. My purpose in attending this meeting was to support the neighbors at 4 and 6 Tanglewood that you've already heard from. And I was not aware that there had been a submission to change the height to reduce the height, but it's still, as Oliver pointed out, both of them pointed out, it's still 6 feet taller than what the committee says it should be. I guess one suggestion is, again, looking at the plans for the building, they're looking at 10-foot ceilings for each of 3 floors. You could certainly build a beautiful house with 9-foot ceilings, even if you don't want to go with a standard 8. And that would keep you down to a pretty reasonable height compared to what they're asking for. So again, my purpose in being here is to support the neighborhood's view that this is out of proportion to the rest of the neighborhood by a lot. And that, in my opinion, there is no particular reason for that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. And actually, that's a good point that you brought out, because often I like to look at when you see a height variance to see what the internal floor dimensions are. You're saying it's, well, I want to hear from Mr. Giordano. You're saying the basement, first and second floor are all 10 feet internal ceiling heights?
Yes, sir.
Okay, not just on the main floor or including the basement.
So I read every
Okay,
floor was
so we'll
10
hear
floors.
from, yeah, because that certainly impacts on the height. We do realize that this, as community planning pointed out and as I highlighted, they did say it is a unique, difficult site, and it's calls for a taller and skinnier or a smaller massing of a house on this lot. So we'll hear back from Mr. Giordano. He'll have a lot to comment on. Committee members, do you have any questions for Mr. Lee or any of the other objecting neighbors, or let's hear from Mr. Giordano, and we'll take a break after this hearing. Okay? We've been at this for almost 2 hours. Okay. Mr. Giordano.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll address Mr. Lee's comments first of all. We made revisions to the drawings, and we do have a 10-foot ceiling on the ground floor. We have a 9-foot ceiling on the second floor, and we reduced the third floor to 8.5. So that's where we made our reductions. We find that still reasonable. Mr. Lee's home is 2 properties to the left of us. He's already about 6.5 meters higher than our finished floor elevation. He's tucked in behind our neighbor's property. So if he went for a similar variance on his property at one point, he would probably find that his property, with any type of revisions to his, he's going to find that the natural zoning for his property puts him way over as well, just by nature of how tall he is. So I understand he's supporting the neighbors, but he's already about 6.5 meters higher than we are. So our additional height does nothing to obstruct his view. Mr. Oliver Chu at Fort Tanglewood, again, you know, what we're doing, we've got a very restrictive development footprint from TRCA. We'd love to make this a 2-story building, with the garage having to remain to retain soil and not being able to develop beyond that. It pushes us extremely close to the other property. Unfortunately, number 4 and number 6 Tanglewood are on the perpendicular property, so they're actually facing the side yard of our property, and we're only building a home that's 11 meters in length. This isn't an 18 or 17 meter long home, so they're facing the short elevation to the left. If you can just scroll a few down on the drawings that you're displaying, you will also see that they spoke about privacy on that elevation. If you can just keep scrolling to the elevations, please. You'll see that the right side elevation that faces them, right, stop just a little higher, right there. You'll see that they're speaking of windows that overlook their property. We only have 4 windows that overlook their property, 2 on the ground floor, 2 on the second floor, none on the third floor. And then, Mr. Moderator, I apologize for making you bounce around, but if you can go to my image, my display screen shot number 7, please. Page 7. Oh, sorry, it's one more. One more. One more, please. Sorry, keep going. Keep going. Okay, stop there, please. So, no, one back. So you'll see that our view towards number 6 Tanglewood I've got a shot in the lower left-hand corner that shows our view from our property looking at theirs. Their front of their property is completely covered by vegetation. They're concerned about privacy for their upper transom. Even their photo that showed our property looking towards our property are completely screened by those large pines on the front of their property, so that we're really not affecting or impacting their height at all. Their property still sits higher than ours, and again, we're looking for a variance that is forcing us to go to a third floor, which isn't our preference, but that's what we're proposing today. Oh, I'll also mention that on that page 11, the photograph on the far lower right corner is in fact Mr. Howard Lee's home, just 2 over from us. So you can see how high he is, and we're basically down at the street level of that home. So you can just see the perspective of where we are in relation to where his existing home is.
Okay, thank you. You're at your 5-minute mark. Anything you'd like to add? Because you're at 5 minutes.
No, again, the restriction from TRCA really forces us to the far right, and we really don't have room to extend further towards the back, like I believe Mr. Sorry, it was Mr. Lamb, Robert Lamb had mentioned, or Mr. Chu had mentioned. We don't have room to maneuver or extend further back, and if anything, if we did that, we would be building more mass facing both of those homes on Tanglewood. I believe our home faces Tanglewood with an elevation that is appropriate. It tries to create a 2-story, or you might want to call it a 2.5 because of the dormers, but the elevations that they showed in their presentation were our old elevations. We've substantially lowered that 4.5 feet, and I believe it's an appropriate solution streetscape.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Giordano. Any questions for Mr. Giordano or any of the neighbors, or is someone ready to, we'll bring it into committee for a decision if there are no further questions? Okay, so let's bring it into committee for a decision. Someone ready to weigh in with a motion? Just to point out, is urban forestry condition number 3 on this application. And the planning, the modifications have been done, and there is one condition of approval about the bird-friendly treatment. Mr. Taylor.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I was strongly compelled by the comments of the agent as well as the community planning department. The essence being that, in planning's words, this is a good candidate for a house with a taller height and a smaller footprint, given the constraints on the lot and the reduced size of the footprint. So I think with the revisions that have been adopted here, I think it's a very sensible, sensitive proposal. And I'm prepared to move approval of, I guess I'll call it revised application 2, to pick up the change in variance 2, number 2. So I'll move approval subject to urban forestry condition 3 and the planning department condition with respect to the bird friendly application.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Seconder for Mr. Taylor's motion. Ms. Ruddick, thank you. All in favor? Unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Giordano, and thank you, neighbors. And we'll now take a 10-minute break. We'll return at 11:35 to proceed with the rest of the morning agenda. Okay.
Can you guys mute the room?
Okay. Okay, is everyone back? Paul, we ready to get started? Okay, welcome back. Our next application is item number 10, 14 VANSCO Road. It's an application to construct a new loading space along the south side of the building and to permit a parking deficiency that will accommodate the proposed interior alterations. There are 3 variances. We have a revised yellow highlighted revision sheet, as well as revised zoning waiver, revised site plan, and zoning waiver. We have an email from the applicant, previous decisions on the property, a covering letter for the revisions, arborist report. We have a parking and loading study and transportation comments. But this is the application that planning was requesting a deferral. The applicant, Mr. Sequeira, advised he wished to proceed. And we also have a deferral from requests from transportation that they would like they'd like it deferred for 3, the applicant to provide an opportunity to address the following: obtain a revised zoning review or zoning review waiver, perhaps we have that. The site plan revisions must clearly illustrate the manner in which the proposed front yard spaces are to be accessed, i.e. provision of an on-site drive aisle. And 3, the proponent must submit acceptable supporting evidence, parking utilization study to justify any parking supply shortfall. But we do have, it looks like, some sort of a parking loading study. So we'll hear from the applicant on that. And lastly, Urban Forestry was requesting a condition number 2. So Mr. Sequeira?
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Sequeira, thank you.
Yes, sir. I'm happy to provide a small presentation to the committee.
Yes, please.
Okay. So thank you very much for the introduction. My name is TJ Sequeira. I am the principal and a planner at Design Plan Services Incorporated, here to present information to you on behalf of the landowner. So I'm going to get right into it. There has been extensive discussions between city planning, city transportation staff, ourselves, our transportation consultants, the owner, the councilor's office, and essentially we made sure that we satisfied all of planning's comments and concerns and all of transportation's comments and concerns. And that's why you have a revised site plan, a revised zoning waiver in front of you, along with the parking utilization study. So the application is to seek approval for the 3 variances as amended through the revised waiver. So the amendments to the variances reduced 2 of the variances, and the 3rd one with regards to number of parking spaces remained the same. The first variance pertains to the amount of front yard landscaping along the front lot line. The originally submitted plans showed 13 parking spaces in front of the building. That was reduced to 6 parking spaces, and that is as a result of discussions with planning staff. They specifically wanted us to maintain as much landscaping in front of the building as possible. So a portion of the front is now maintained as landscaping, and there are only 6 spaces instead of the 13 originally shown. We'd also like to note that the maintenance of landscaping on an employment site is a desirable outcome. However, the primary function of employment land is to provide economic activity. And this economic activity and the accommodation of tenants inside the building is exactly what this application is doing. It is the interior alterations that are generating the need for the parking variance. I would also like to note that the parking variance indicates a total of 53 parking spaces are being provided on site, but that does not include the 6 spaces proposed in front of the building. So there are actually going to be 59 spaces provided. However, the 6 in front of the building are not counted because they are not legal spaces. They do not have legal drive aisle. They will be accessed directly from VANSCO Road, and that is indicated on the revised drawing in accordance with what transportation asked us to do. We have reviewed the Transportation Services staff report, and we did address all 3 comments. We provided a zoning waiver. We updated the site plan to indicate how the proposed parking spaces will be addressed from VANSCO Road, and the parking and loading study was submitted. It's dated September 17th. All these documents have been provided to Transportation and to Planning. However, we have been advised that due to staff shortages in Transportation, they didn't have time to review the parking study, and that's why they asked for the deferral. However, the parking study does demonstrate and support the variances proposed. I would also like to note that the variance is only to the former Etobicoke zoning bylaw because the new bylaw 569 is not applicable to this property. If the new zoning bylaw 569 was applicable to this property, only 62 parking spaces would be required and 59 parking spaces are being provided. Therefore, there's only a deficiency of 3 parking spaces. Also, I want to bring to the committee's attention that in 2009, a decision was rendered on this property to already grant a parking reduction. In that case, there was a requirement for 86 parking spaces required and 59 parking spaces provided. So this application in front of you only increased the required parking spaces due to interior alterations to the building. However, the 59 spaces will still be maintained if the parking in the front yard is counted. The owner did obtain a letter of support from the ward councillor. It should be in your package. It is filed on the AIC, and the ward councillor is fully in support of this application as indicated in his letter. Overall, it is our opinion that the application meets the tests under the Planning Act. We have addressed all the comments of Transportation and Planning staff, and we believe it meets all the tests and should be approved. And I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, sir. Just one thing, question for staff. The applicant has pointed out quite rightly, and it's reflected. I had a question from his parking study that mentioned the number in the Toronto citywide bylaw as opposed to the specific. So the question for staff is, does the citywide bylaw sort of supersede, or are they sort of side by side? Because there is a much smaller deficiency, the requirement for 62 rather than 94 spaces. So can staff just let us know what, are these 2 bylaws side by side, or is it the old bylaw just showing because some kind of appeal process for the, as we used to see when the new bylaw was transitioning in?
Based on all of the variances, they're all from the former Etobicoke zoning code. So this might be a hole in the bylaw where the new bylaw does not apply to this site.
That is exactly correct, Mr. Chair, and thank you to staff for answering that.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for the agents? And we don't have any other speakers, so If there's no other questions, I guess we got to take it into committee for a decision. Mr. Taylor.
Yes, Mr. Chair. In spite of what the agent says, and I got no reason to not believe him, I would still like to see before me definitive favorable comments from transportation and planning. For whatever reason, they're not in a position to provide them at this time. So I move for deferral.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that motion?
Danny Bellissimo seconds the motion.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Okay, I am opposed. Motion carries 4-1, and the matter is deferred.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee.
Okay, our next application is item number 11, 12 SUNNYLEA Avenue East. It's an application to construct a new detached dwelling with an attached garage. There we have the yellow highlighted revision sheet showing some changes that have been made, basically to variances 1 and variance the lot coverage, and variance number 6. The roof eaves have both been reduced, and of those 9 variances, we have photos of a rear tree. Planning is requesting modifications. Transportation has no objections, and we have 7 letters of support. So the speaker on this application is Joe Sabatino. No other speakers.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Joseph Tino of Sapcon Design. I am the agent for the owners.
Okay, how about making us a brief presentation?
Yes, I just want to clarify one thing. This is an addition to an existing 2-story house, not a new house. But because we're taking down the 2nd-story walls, which ends up being more than 50% of the existing, I guess they classified it as a new build, but yes, in reality, it is an addition to an existing home. Items 1, 2, and 6 pertaining to the new addition. The rest of them are variances pertaining to the existing structure. So those really are not in our control. We did canvass the neighbors. There seems to be no opposition to it. We've got quite a few letters of support. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. So you've made the changes being requested.
I just wanted to clarify that it is an addition, not a new build.
Okay. Well, it's clear, as you pointed out. It's the city staff or the city determines this, makes it into a new detached. But we do recognize that what you've advised, that you are retaining the walls. But that's the way, I guess, because of the amount that's coming down. You do have 7 letters of support. Okay. Committee members, any questions for Mr. Sabatino? Or is someone ready for a motion? And there is urban forestry condition 3 on this. Mr. Komarek?
Sorry, I should unmute first. Yeah, I find the application to be meeting the board tests and would therefore like to move approval as modified and subject to forestry condition 3.
Okay, thank you. Seconder for Mr. Komarek's motion. Ms. Reddick, thank you. All in favor? Unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Sabatino.
Thank you.
Okay, next application, item number 12, 72 Algoma Street. And this is, again, we have a revision. Good. These are great because it shows they're making changes in relation to consultation with community planning. So this is again a revision sheet. There are 6 variances. Variances 2, 4, and 5 have been revised. We have planning asking a condition of approval that it be constructed as illustrated front elevation as it relates to the building height. The speaker for this application, only one, is the agent Branko Mladenov. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm the architect of the project.
Okay, so it looks like you're okay with the staff condition?
Yes, we are.
Okay, anything you'd like to advise the committee before I see if they have any questions or if someone's ready to make a motion?
If you have any question, I can explain.
Okay, any questions for the agent? And if not, is someone ready to weigh in with a motion? We do have urban forestry condition number 2 on this as well. Mr. Taylor.
With that, yes, Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to move approval of this application. I find that the 4 tests under the Planning Act are satisfied. So I move approval subject to urban forestry condition number 2 and the condition requested by the Community Planning Department.
Okay, thank you. Seconded for Mr. Taylor's motion. Ms. Ruddick, thank you. All in favor? Okay, unanimously approved. You have your approval, Mr. Mladenov.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Our next application is item number 13, 457, the Kingsway. And we have on this application is for a 1-story rear addition with 2 variances. There's a cover letter, applicant submission with photos. We have opposition from 35 Princess Anne Crescent, a neighbor to the rear, and a 5-signature petition, all neighbors on Princess and Crescent, so 6 opposition in total. And the speaker for this is Lydia Jovan, the owner of the property.
Good morning, everyone.
Good
My
morning.
name is Lydia Jovan, and I'm the owner of 457 The Kingsway.
Okay.
My plan is to build a 1-story addition to the back of the house, and the whole house will remain a bungalow. I don't know why the neighbors in the rear
Lydia,
are complaining.
you have joined 3 different ways and you're getting a lot of feedback.
Oh,
We can hear
I
you
see your
now, but
echo.
can you exit your other ways and not listen through YouTube because it's affecting the sound?
It's funny, we don't hear the feedback here on this one, but
Yeah.
I hear it. I hear it.
yeah, so you have a lot of issues by neighbors for a 1-story addition here.
Yes. Will I
And
sound
there
better
are
now?
only 2 variances, right? So I don't know if they're objecting to items that are not. It's only the, they're only allowed to object to the variances, not to the actual fact that you're building a 1-story addition. So if you can weigh in, you were about to say something when you were asked to turn off your other devices. So please continue.
Yeah. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, yeah, like for the neighbors, our house doesn't compromise their privacy because it is not even visible to them. There are 22-foot cedar trees across the entire backyard. So the variances requested actually relate to the west side lot line. And the project was discussed with the west side neighbor, and they don't have any complaints or issues. So really, the first variance, there is 1 block from me on 5 Twyford Court. They were approved for this variance. And the second variance, dealing with the 17 meters thing, In fact, the length of the house with my addition would only be 15.1 meters. So the length issue only exists because the garage sticks out in the front opposite side. So I also saw a variance was granted for a maximum permitted building length, including the side yard width for 425 the Kingsway. So I'm hoping this can be considered, as I believe the variants are minor in nature. So I would like to hear what the committee has to say.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jovan. Thank you. I'd just like to point out, it looks like I'm looking at the one substantive letter rather than the petition from the neighbor at 35 Princess Anne Crescent, and they talk about the proposal, as I mentioned, if the addition were to proceed, the building will now be closer to the back fence located on the north side of the property by approximately 5 meters, 16.5 feet. I happen to live on the other side of the fence, and yes, this addition will create privacy. But that is not a variance. You don't have a rear yard setback variance. So it appears, at least to hear that that's as of right, you're not triggering a rear yard variance. So committee members, any questions for Ms. Jovan? Or is someone ready for a motion? And there is no, there is no urban forestry on this. We do have the applicant's submission and photos before us.
Danny Bellissimo is ready to make a motion if there are no further questions.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
I find that the variances are minor in nature. It's not a huge project, so I would like to move approval for the variances.
Thank you. There are no conditions. Seconded for Mr. Bellissimo. Mr. Taylor, thank you. All in favor? Unanimous approval. Thank you, Ms. Jovan. Enjoy your addition following the appeal period, obviously.
Thank you very much.
Okay, our next application is item number 14, 420 LANOR Avenue. It's an application for a new detached dwelling with an attached garage. And there are 7 variances. We have a cover letting outlining the 4 changes that were made as requested by planning, an arborist report, and the speaker, we only have one. We have Hedy Perez, the agent, as well, the neighbor at 422 right next door. And my question for Mr. Perez is, are the variances now correct as per the revisions? Is what we have, because I don't see a yellow revision sheet here, so whether this is accurate or whether there are some changes to be made. Mr. Perez, welcome.
Good morning, Chairman and committee members. I'm Eddie Perez. I'm here on behalf of the owners. Yes, the application as of now is accurate. They already eliminated the variances that we got removed. We removed the front yards variance where we pushed the house back, and also the other variances which were also removed, which it shows on the waiver as well.
Okay, so we don't have a letter from the neighbor next door who's going to be making submissions. So I don't know if you want to await what they have to say to make a full presentation. I don't think we need a full presentation unless members wish a presentation, or let's hear from the neighbor as to what the concerns are. And
okay,
there is urban forestry condition number 1 on this application. Any questions for Mr. Perez at this time? Okay, so let's hear from the neighbor at 422. We have 2 names listed. We'll only have 1 speaker, obviously. So who is the speaker?
Right. Hello, everyone. My name is Athanasia Sia Barlas. I just go by Sia. And I'm a resident homeowner of 422 LANOR for 19 years. The other homeowner of 65 years has lived most of her life here, and her mother was the original owner of the home. So we're very familiar with the lay of the land and everything that goes on with the property. Again, I apologize in advance for my ignorance. We have not met the owner or the agent, and I'm just going by the plans that were provided on your website. My concern with the new build is primarily the west side, our east side, especially between the 2 homes. but also with the backyards. And these issues relate to watershed. So the accumulation or dispersion of water that could lead to basement flooding. According to Plan A1, page A1, currently the distance from our chimney to the property line is 1.03 meters, and the home next door from the chimney to the property line is 0.91 meters. So I believe that we are already below the minimum of the 1.2 yard allowed side yard setback that is stated in variance 3 and 5. Also, if you look at the elevation levels, and I don't know what the units are, but I guess it's all relative, whether it's meters or feet or something else. If you start from the back of the house, it is by the little fence there, it is about 108.02. As you move towards the middle of the two homes, it's about 107.93, so lower. And then when you get to the corner of the homes, it's about 108.06. And then to the sidewalk is 107.86. So currently, as the homes stand, we cannot create enough slope to make a ditch that would allow for water to drain. So we sort of try to mitigate this by sloping as much earth as possible on the side and trying not to have any extra water flow over into the area. The water tends to pool there, and previous owners have not taken care of their eaves troughs, and so if there is a situation with overflow of water, it tends to pool there and it doesn't drain out appropriately. Also, the quality of the soil is such that the drainage is poor and slow. So that's just how it's been the entire time. So you notice that if it's a sudden rainfall, then it just tends to stay there until it gets time to disperse. So it's a precarious area in terms of water drainage and a potential for basement flooding, because on my east side, I have two basement windows there, and the clearance is about 1 to 2 inches from the window to the soil level. So I'm objecting to the setback variances that involve the west side, so number 3 and number 5, and it states that the variance is 0.83 meters from the property line. So I've tried to look at the plans everywhere to see where I could find or add and subtract to get an 0.83, but I wasn't able to do that. So I would like some clarification with that. So if you look at drawing A7 and A4, the west side shows the actual distance from the building to the property line is 3 feet or 0.9 meters, but that does not include a roof overhang of 1 foot and 4 inches and the eaves, and it brings the entire distance as shown in A7, 0.39 meters to the property line. Page A4 shows the roof overhang as 1 foot 8 inches from the property line, which I calculated to be 0.508 meters from the property line. So I'm a little bit confused with all of these numbers and as to actually what the number is that's going to overhang on my property, not necessarily just the side of the building. Also, the building has a sloped roof on the west side, so I believe that all of these elements, the existing proximity of the homes, the further encroachment requested with the variance in 3 and 5, the elevation and grade levels, all of these things have the great potential of causing watershed issues on my property that are real and relevant and have currently been experienced with the situation between the two homes anyhow. So the closer the new build comes to the property line, the more chance there is for water to encroach on my side.
Okay, thank you. If you can please wrap up, please. You're at 5 minutes.
Sure. So that's the major issue again is with the backyard for similar watershed issues because there's a walkout and I don't know how they're going to prevent water from flowing into their walkout, what they're going to build on that
Okay, thank you.
west side.
Thank you. Thank you. So basically, you're concerned with the water issues of the additional foot closer to the west side lot line. You feel you haven't replaced and expressed any other like issues with the massing or whatever. Your issue appears to be with water.
Mostly.
And so perhaps we can hear back from Mr. Perez as to what is being done to mitigate for the additional foot closer that you are from the bylaw in terms of the the setback from the west side of almost like 0.4 of an acre of a meter. Mr. Perez, so that's the only speaker we have. Does anyone have any questions for the neighbor, Ms. Barlas, before we move on to hear from Mr. Perez in his rebuttal? No? Okay. Mr. Perez?
Yeah, hi. We went through looking at the projects in the area, and it's common to have 0.9 side yard setback. We also went back and forth with planning and we tried to accommodate all their needs. And as per the neighbors, she was saying the rear yard, we don't have any rear yard setback issue. And as per the grading, we're going to be getting a grading plan done by a professional surveyor, and it's going to grade all the water properly and to the back, to the side, and to the front. But it'll be all done in equals span so that the water doesn't generate all in one spot, and it will be all on our property. None of the water will be drained onto the neighbor's property whatsoever. And it'll be done, and it'll be looked at by the building department. As you know, we always submit a grading plan, and they go over the grading plan and ensure that all the grades are according and that the water will be drained properly. So I don't feel that there'll be any issues with the water drainage whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Any questions for Mr. Perez or the neighbor, Mr. Komorik?
I have a question for Mr. Perez. I'd hoped to ask earlier, but I forgot. Is any of the existing house being saved, or is this a complete new build?
It's a complete new build.
So do you know what the current setback is on the west?
On the left, I'll have to look at the
On the west side? What is your current west side setback?
I'll have to look at 1 sec, okay? Let me open the survey. Right now we have 1.32.
1.32, and you're asking for 0.9.
1.27, sorry, 1.27.
Okay, so you have 1.27 and you're asking for 0.91. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So you're asking for a worse situation than what exists now on a new build.
Yeah, we were asking for it so we can get the design that it will make the flow for the house, so you have a good flow. We don't want
I
the-
understand that. I understand that. I'm not happy with that. You know, if you were asking for what you have now, I wouldn't have a problem with it. Thanks.
Can you just
Okay,
interject
any
here for
other
a second?
questions? I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, I'm looking at the survey and I see a 0.99 meter west side setback because of the chimney.
Oh, yeah, the chimney, that's
Not
correct.
right, Mr. Perez?
Yes, sir, and there's also a shed at the back that's
Yes,
encroaching.
I'm also seeing a frame shed that sits on the lot line.
It's
which
right
is
on the
gonna be
property.
removed.
That's correct. So
Thank
that
you.
situation is going to improve what the chimney also is, like you said, but the front of the house is what I had said, 1.27.
But the main part of the house is set back further now than the main part of the new house will be.
That's correct.
Okay, any other questions, or is someone ready for a motion? Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm sad. The big issue here seems to be the west side yard. I'm not terribly concerned about that. I noticed that the neighbor at 422, their side yard, again, from the chimney is 1.03. So I think a reduction in the side yard to 0.8, whatever it is a minor variance. So I find the application meets the 4 tests, and I move approval subject to urban forestry condition 1 and the planning department condition.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. A seconder for Mr. Taylor's motion.
Eddie Bellissimo seconds the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, what's the planning condition?
Sorry. There's no planning. Is there a
just
planning
don't-
condition? I don't
yeah.
believe there's a planning condition on item number 14. Madam, Ms. Bartosik, I don't see a planning condition. Do you see
Yeah,
one?
I don't see one either. That's why I'm asking.
I misplaced my handwritten note. I apologize. My motion would be subject only to urban forestry condition number 1.
Yeah, there is
Okay,
no
thank
planning
you.
condition.
Okay.
Okay, so
Right.
that's been seconded by Mr. Bellissimo. I just point out another factor in favor of granting this very small west side variance compared to the existing is the fact that the neighbor's concerns was not with the massing, but just with watershed issues, which she repeated over and over. And Mr. Perez has pointed out, I let her continue, that it's really not a planning concern, and it will be addressed by at the building stage. Okay, so all in favor? Unanimous approval. Or Mr. Komarek, are you in favor or no? Mr. Komarek?
I'm going to go down opposed.
Okay, so the motion carries 4-1.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. And thank
you very
you
much.
to the neighbor as well. Okay, and item number 15 is the next application. 35 Blue Springs Road. We have revised yellow highlighted revision sheet of the notice, revised plans, and revised zoning waiver. It's an application to construct a new detached dwelling with an attached garage, and there are 7 variances. One has been eliminated. There were 8. There's now 7. 1 was eliminated. 2 have been reduced. We have a cover letter, supporting material and renderings, and a map from the applicant. Planning wants changes is reflected in the revised notice, and we'll perhaps get the agent, Mr. Vieira, to confirm that that is now reflected correctly. And that's what we have. So only one speaker, Mr. Vieira, the agent on behalf of the applicant.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Marco Vieira. I'm the agent and the designer for this application.
Yes.
So you're correct in seeing the revised notice. We did go back and forth with planning to clarify our site plan and find ways to reduce the variance. So variance number 1 was reduced, even though it was slightly, but it did reduce to 33.1. And also the length of the dwelling was also reduced. Depth of the dwelling stayed the same because it was taken from the minimum front yard setback. So what we have done as well is we've shifted the house forward so that it's more in line with the neighbor on the right side of our property. Left side property is currently under development. They went to T-Lab, and there will be a series of new dwellings on that side. Drawings do reflect the changes that were made as a request by planning. We have no objections to being tied to those planning conditions for approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vieira. I also point out I didn't mention community planning in addition to the 3 modifications which you've already done is in the revised yellow sheet, that they also
Correct.
want a condition that to be substantially constructed as illustrated on the site plan dated September 15th, the revised one as it relates to the length and depth. I assume you're okay with that?
Yes, we are.
Okay. As well as urban forestry condition number 3. You're okay with that?
Correct.
Okay, so let's see if committee members have any further questions for you or if someone's ready to weigh in with a motion.
Danny Bellissimo is ready to make a motion if there are no further questions.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, I find the variances are minor in nature and move for approval as per the revised waiver and subject to planning's recommendation number 4. Proposed development shall be constructed substantially in accordance with the site plan submitted September 15, 2021, held on file by the Committee of Adjustment as relates to building length and depth and the condition of forestry.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bellissimo. We have a seconder for Mr. Bellissimo's motion. Mr. Taylor, all in favor? Unanimous approval. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vieira.
Mr. Chair.
Okay. Our next application is item number 16, 84 Old Burnhamthorpe Road. It's an application to convert the existing building into a club, a Masonic lodge. We have on this application, the only variance is that the proposed club is not a permitted use in an RD zone. There's a covering letter, good cover letter actually, talking about it's been vacant since 2018. It's an adaptive reuse of an existing building without any interior or exterior renovations. I claim Masonic Lodge is not a club per se, and we have and then community planning wants to limit in the event of an approval that it should be for a 5-year period. This is pursuant to not a lease, but agreement of purchase and sale. So we'll hear from the agent on that. The agent is Lim Levac.
Sorry, Chair, through you. We also have another speaker, Heather Stoddard, has also asked to speak on this application.
Okay, and we have an address for Heather. What did you say the last name is? Stoddard?
Hold on one second. I'm just going to get our address for you. I actually don't think she has mentioned her address.
Okay, so let's hear first of all from Mr. Levac, and we'll hear, she'll advise when she speaks. So we have the cover letter, the planning limitation report, and we also have support, I didn't mention, from 14-71 Old Burnhamthorpe Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good afternoon. Yes, I'm here on behalf of the Etobicoke Masonic Center. They're currently in the community at another location at 596 Renforth Drive, and they're leasing a facility. So they're looking for a permanent home, basically. This site's been on the market for a number of years. I know it's been tied up and dropped by a few residential infill developers. It suits their purposes perfectly, and as I said, it's a very good adaptive reuse of the former church, which was run by the Church of the Latter-day Saints. Our client is the contractual owner by agreement of purchase and sale, and so obviously pending the outcome of today's hearing, they'll be in a position to close their deal. The property under the official plan is designated neighborhoods and is zoned RD in the zoning bylaw. And as I said in my cover letter, a Masonic temple or a Masonic lodge is not a defined term in the bylaw. It doesn't really fit neatly into any category. So by default, through our zoning review, it was deemed to be a club, hence the need for the variance. The Masonic Center has no plan to enlarge the existing building or parking lot. There are no other setback or parking related variances. Their hours of operation are very limited, probably less than the church. There's no more than 15 to 20 members there at a time. They meet about 4 times a week and the odd Saturday morning for their executive for breakfast meetings. So they're a very quiet user. Just turning to the staff report, we obviously support the staff recommendation. We believe it meets the 4 tests in terms of meeting the general intent of the zoning bylaw and the official plan. The neighborhood's designation promotes cultural and recreational facilities in neighborhoods, and this use would function very similarly to that. In terms of the desirability test, we believe it is a very good adaptive reuse of a vacant church building, and we believe it's minor as well. Our client did knock on a few doors and introduce themselves to some of the area residents that surround the site, and my understanding is that initiative was very well received. Finally, just on the issue of the 5-year condition, we're happy with that condition. In fact, what we intend to do, depending on today's outcome, should the application be viewed favorably, is that rather than come back in another 5 years and renew the variance, they would simply file a very, very minor rezoning application to amend for a site-specific bylaw amendment to just add that use to a Masonic lodge as an existing use in an RD zone. So that would essentially allow the use to go there permanently without having to renew any future variances. So those are my comments, Mr. Chairman. I would be happy to respond to any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. I was actually a little surprised you're okay with the staff condition, because especially it's agreement of purchase and sale, it's not a lease. And although perhaps the fact that you're not doing any internal or external changes, sometimes we see outdoor bar like patios and restaurants, and they have to spend a lot of money, and then they're not too happy to have it limited because of the upfront costs. Your upfront cost is buying the property, so I'm a little surprised that you're okay with that, but that's a good thing. Committee members, any questions for Mr. Levac, or someone ready? Oh, we have the neighbor to hear from as well, Heather. We don't have her last name or her address. So any questions for Mr. Levac at this time? And otherwise, let's hear from the neighbor.
So through you, Mr. Chair, Heather is actually the letter of support that's at the bottom of the page. Here.
Oh, from the 14-71 Old Burnhamthorpe. Okay, so perhaps we can hear from her briefly. Just find out what the nature is. Is that a condominium, a residential condominium unit? Just curious as to what that was. So Heather, perhaps give us your last name and your address, or just confirm that. Yeah, it's Heather Stoddart. That's her letter. So she wrote in, you asked her for her address. We have her address. Is she on the line?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, could you
I'm
please
here.
speak
Can
a
you
little
hear me?
louder? We can barely hear you.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. My question, I had a couple of questions, but the most important was
We
the
need your full
5-year
name and
limit.
address for the record.
It's in the email.
I know, but
am
you
the
need to,
person in the email.
you're at
sorry.
a public
Heather
hearing, so you have to
Stoddart,
state it.
14-71 Old Burnhamthorpe Road in Toronto, M9C 3J6.
Thank you.
My biggest question is in regards to that 5-year limit that the city had recommended. It does leave the question of the purpose and use of space open, and it's something that as a community we've seen a lot of change and we've had a lot of different things being proposed for the area. It would be nice to have some confirmation of something continuous, and I question why that 5-year limit is there and whether or not it's something that can be addressed through committee to answer that primary question that I have.
Sorry, what's your question? Because all I see in your letter is that you're supportive of the application. So what's your question?
The 5-year limit that the city is recommending
Yes.
to the zoning change, I'm questioning why that's in place, because if it having a permanent change of zoning now would provide the community with a measure of stability, whereas if we have to wait 5 years or less, depending on when they put in an application to change the zoning again, we have to go through this process again. If the city is confident now that this is a change that is acceptable, can we not make that change more permanent and save the community the going through this again, and taxpayer dollars of going through it again as well?
Okay, the staff is asking that. They often ask that in these some of the situations where they just want to make sure the impact on the community isn't great, that they're having, you know, their 24/7 massive amount of people. Same thing like with the patio on a restaurant. They often do it for a trial period, and then they either have to come back repeatedly, or the second time they make it permanent, or in this case, the agent, the planner said maybe to avoid that, he'll come back to make a change to the zoning bylaw amendment. So that is, I don't think it's, you're a neighbor. Are you a member of the club, or your husband, or what's your standing, or
No,
just
neither of us are
an
members.
area neighbor?
I
think
live
it-
across the road.
Okay,
and quite
it's for the
frankly,
protection,
the
this is for the
lot
protection of the
being-
neighbors, to make sure that the use is in fact compatible, and it's not a club, it's not a motorcycle gang, it's not a Studio 54 discotheque. They just want to make sure, as he stated, he said, however, to ensure the building is being used as intended, should the committee choose to approve, staff recommends it be used limit for a maximum of 5 years. Doesn't mean it won't be renewed or changed. It just means they want to do it on a
Okay.
trial basis to make sure there isn't an adverse impact on you and the other neighbors.
That seems reasonable. Thank you for explaining that. My question was, why is that in place? I'm not debating whether it
Yeah.
was going to be in place. Thank
Okay,
you.
so that's why it's in place, I guess. I was surprised that the applicant has agreed, because they are buying the property and not just leasing it for 5 years. But he's okay with that, so I guess he's very confident that the use is actually going to be as stated. You know, the Masonic Lodge is is sort of a fraternal organization, not really a club per se. So that's why the agent is going to pursue that on that basis. Okay, so
Thank you.
okay, Mr. Levac, I hope I didn't. You're going to have to share your fee with me for answering the question. Would you like to add anything, Mr. Levac, for the neighbors' benefit? Mr. Levac there?
Muted. Sorry, I was on mute, Mr. Chairman. Couldn't control that. No, your point is well taken, and really the reason for the 5 years is, as you're quite correct, is just to allow staff to monitor the use to make sure it's compatible. And as I said earlier, our client fully intends to legalize it permanently through a site-specific rezoning application. It should be a very, very minor application, just so that they know they're there for good. They don't have to come back every 5 years and go through the process
Okay, well,
again.
typically when this happens the second time, the agent or applicant will ask it to be made permanent, and if it's been acceptable for 5 years, typically the committee would agree, but you can decide how to proceed, whether a zoning bylaw or to come back next time to make it permanent in 5 years. That's up to your client. Committee members, any
Okay.
questions, or are we ready for a motion?
I have a question for staff, if I may. Is there any way to tie this to the occupant rather than just doing a 5-year? I think the potential concern here is that no banquet facilities take place there. And if we just leave it as a club use, then there's nothing to prevent the current owner to selling it to a Legion or to another user that could have banquets or parties or whatever taking place here.
So no, you can't tie it to a specific named user. You can add a condition that no banquet facilities or type of events be held on this property.
We can condition that there are no banquet facilities?
Yeah, because this is a use variance, it's a residential detached zone. So
Right.
it is entirely possible, since you're not restricting something that is permitted in that zone.
Because my preference would be to do that rather than to do the 5-year time limit. But
Well, the 5-year time limit too is to make sure that it is appropriate for the site. There are no complaints. It wasn't clearly identified what happens at the Masonic Lodge. So
Yeah,
they want to make
Mr.
sure. that
Kamara, the
it's-
staff is concerned with not just that they're going to flip it and it's going to be something else. They're concerned that they want to monitor this particular, the Masonic Lodge's use. So what you
Well, if
suggest,
we define what the
that wouldn't
use is,
take
then
away
we're
the
actually,
requirement for a staff asking for the 5-year. Staff is concerned with this use, not just what they're going to turn it and sell it to the Hells Angels, right? So I think they still want that condition. Anyways,
fair
someone
enough.
ready
I'm
to
just
weigh
saying
in with a
5
motion?
years is a 5 years is a long time.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'd be prepared to move a motion with a condition that the site be barred from holding banquet facilities.
Are you making a motion? Please make a motion.
That's my motion.
Okay, so approve the application and grant the 5-year term as requested by community planning, which the applicant has accepted that condition.
Sure.
Okay. And you want also a condition, as Ms. Bartosik said, no banquet facilities on the property.
Yes, please.
That's correct? Okay. Thank you. Someone ready to second that motion? Mr. Taylor? All in favor? Unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Levesque, and thank you to the neighbors.
Mr. Chair. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
members of the committee.
Okay, item number 17 is our next application. 90 12th Street. It's an application for a new detached dwelling with an attached garage with 5 variances. There is a cover letter, an arborist report. We have one letter of opposition from 57 Cliveden. Okay, yeah, and that's all we have on this application. And the speaker on this is Eddie Perez. The neighbor points out he's surprised at Mr. Mizzi. He writes to the director that he was surprised that this application, which exceeds the maximum floor area 41%, 0.7 isn't rejected outright. That is not permitted. Anyone can make an application for anything. For a 20-story building on their little residential lot, the city is obliged to take in the application. So we do not reject, or the division does not reject applications outright. Mr. Perez.
Hello, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members.
Okay. We have
So
your
we're,
cover letter.
Yeah, as per planning, we lowered the house to 8 meters as per planning's request.
Okay. We have urban forestry
look at,
conditions 2 and 3. You're okay with that?
Yeah, we're okay with that.
Okay. So anything you'd like to advise the committee other than the fact that you've made these changes at, planning's request, you've made changes, and otherwise we'll just see if there's any questions for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Perez? And if not, is someone ready for a motion?
Annie Benissimos ready to make a motion if there are no further questions. I find that the variances are minor in nature. Move for approval, subject to the condition by forestry.
Okay, thank you. A seconder for Mr. Belisimo's motion. Mr. Kamark? All in favor? And it's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Perez.
Thank you very much.
Okay, item number 18 has been deferred, so we'll move on to item number 19, 79 Coney Road. This is for a second-story addition. There are 2 variances, and we have absolutely nothing on file on this application. Speaker is Michael Shirzadfar, the agent.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Michael Shirzadfar. I'm the agent on behalf of the homeowners at 79 Coney Road.
Okay, very straightforward application, only 2 variances. It's a second-story addition top-up, and we have nothing on file. Any questions for Mr. Shirzadfar, or is someone ready for a motion? There are no conditions. Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I find the variances requested meet the four tests under the Planning Act, and I move approval with no conditions.
Okay, thank you, sir. Seconded by Mr.
Andy
Bellissimo.
seconds the motion.
All in favor? Unanimous approval. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, and our last application of the morning session, same agent as the first speaker on the first application, Mr. Igelman. This is an application to construct a second-story front addition, and to extend the existing garage in the rear yard. There are 8 variances. We have photos. Transportation has 5 conditions of approval. There are 2 letters of opposition from number 4 and number 3 Edgemore Drive, and I can't read my writing. There's no objection to oh yeah, the neighbor, we have a letter of opposition. I believe their concern is dealing with the, that they have no problem with a walkway in terms of the expansion of the driveway, but not if it's used for parking additional vehicle in front of the house. And I believe that's, transportation has comments as well. We said there are five conditions of approval, and urban forestry is requesting condition number 5, which is a refusal or denial. Mr. Igelman? David Igelman there?
Good afternoon, Sir Chair. Through you, Sir Chair, would the committee like a presentation for this application?
I don't see any hands up, so I don't believe we need one. Perhaps you can just deal with this issue about the walkway and the driveway, just a little bit of clarification. If anyone has any issue about that in terms of what the neighbors' concerns were.
So, yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, in regards to variance number 6, as per the public notice, as per the transportation comments received from Transportation Services regarding this application, which are noted on their report dated September 20th, 2021, they recommend the committee impose a condition that the site plan illustrate that 1.81 meters of the proposed driveway width will be labeled as walkway. That 1.81 meters of proposed driveway width is the only additional width that is being proposed, and that will be basically eliminated as a result of relabeling that portion as a walkway. However, we cannot eliminate this variance from the approval out of an abundance of caution, because the zoning examiner may interpret the proposed walkway to be part of the driveway. So out of an abundance of caution, we would like to request this variance still.
Okay.
And in regards to, just to address the neighbors' concerns briefly, I note that 3 Edgemore's only concern was related to the proposed front yard parking, and this was also one of the concerns of 4 Edgemore Drive. However, the variance related to the front yard parking is also being requested out of an abundance of caution, because there's no intention with this proposal to provide parking space in the front yard. The parking space, the one required parking space, as noted also within the Transportation Services report issued for this application, can be provided in the proposed altered detached garage, and can also be provided in front of the detached garage. So there is no intention to provide front yard parking with this proposal. It is just being requested out of abundance of caution, again, just because the zoning examiner's interpretation of the proposed plans are that the parking is being provided in the front yard. However, there is no intention to do so. And then for Edgemore Drive also just noted that the garage there. The only other issue that 4 Edgemore Drive brought up was the 25-foot garage extension. However, I believe that is a misunderstanding on the neighbor's part, because the proposed extension to the garage is going to be a 4.5-foot extension. It will not be a 25-foot extension. So those are the only neighbors' concerns, and I'm happy to answer any other questions at
Okay,
this time.
thank you, Mr. Igelman. Any questions for Mr. Igelman, or is someone ready to weigh in with a motion?
I have a question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Danny. Just, sir, you've submitted a revised site plan which shows the portion which is to be a walkway. That walkway terminates at the property line. Is your intent, I'm assuming then, that that will not run the full length to the side, to the street?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to answer Mr. Komorek's question, I am actually not aware of any revised plans that have been submitted. I'm not sure where those revised plans are. They were not updated to the AIC, and I have not been notified by the architect who prepared these plans that we have prepared a revised set of plans. So to my understanding at this time, to answer your question, Mr. Komorek, it is my understanding that the walkway will extend to the street, considering that it will have to provide access from the street to the front of the dwelling. So I don't believe it will be terminated at the property line. However, the variances and the additional 1.81 meters that is on the property is what the variance is being requested for. Any proposed works on city-owned property will have to be permitted by the necessary permits issued by the city.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to address the concerns as I understand them from the neighbors. I believe the concern is that you don't create a second parking spot on that walkway, which is what a lot of people have done in that area, and we're just trying not to perpetuate a bad situation.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I understand your concern, Mr. Komorek, but however, there's no intention to park in the front yard with this proposal. The existing garage, as well as a portion of the driveway at the rear, can serve as parking spaces and will serve as parking spaces for the proposal.
Understood. And my mistake, I'm looking at revised drawings from another file. Sorry, just too many here all at once. So I take that statement back, and thank you for your explanation.
Any other questions, or someone ready?
Danny Bellissimo would like to follow up with a question. Could staff zoom in on that front landscaping site plan? I'm a bit confused about the word walkway and parking on the walkway. To the applicant, is the word walkway that 1.22 meter location herringbone pattern, is that what the concern is being raised about? That word walkway, is that the location?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to answer Mr. Bellissimo's question, if you zoom in on the front portion of the site plan there, you'll see that the area with the herringbone pattern is labeled as 1.81 meters in width. That is what the variance is referring to in terms of the driveway width, and transportation's recommended condition is that herringbone portion be relabeled as walkway.
Okay.
Proposed walkway.
So basically, we're not talking about the word where you are labeling walkway presently. Is they want to change the wording proposed driveway, which has been highlighted in blue now, to walkway.
Exactly. Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
But there's no curb there or anything, so basically people can park there if they want in the future. Fine, I understand. It's basically hard surface. Thank you.
Yeah, it's basically the conditions, number one of the transportation, illustrate 1.81 of the proposed driveway width to be labeled as a walkway. So if you impose that as a condition, that will be done. So is someone ready to make a motion? Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm satisfied that the requested variances meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act. And I move approval subject to the Transportation Department conditions and Urban Forestry Condition 1.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor, because I always count on you to weigh in with a motion. Seconded for Mr. Taylor's motion. Mr. Komarek, thank you. All in favor? It's unanimous approval, and we now stand adjourned until 1:45 when we will return to start the 1 p.m. agenda items, starting with item number 21, which I think is a deferral anyway. So we'll see you back here in an hour. Have a good break, everyone.